we have to talk about the brand new Pokedex in Pokemon Winds and Waves, and the rumor on the street is it's going to be the biggest Pokedex of all time, quite literally double the size as the previous biggest generation, which is Generation 5, with 156 brand new Pokemon in the Unova region, which I think is very funny because that is the 5th generation with only 5 more Pokemon than the original Generation 1 games, and now we're going into a generation that is 5 generations ahead of the Unova games, and we're getting a Pokedex that is almost double the size. Obviously, the map of this game is going to be huge. It will be the biggest Pokemon game of all time in terms of the size of the map. So of course, that means we have to have a lot of brand new Pokemon to fill it in, right? On the other hand, people don't want to just have Pokemon filling in the region. We actually want stuff within the region and throughout the map to make the game just that much more fun, right? This is definitely not by coincidence, though. There's definitely a very specific reason as to why we are getting the biggest Pokedex of all time, and I think I may have just cracked the code on this. So make sure to stay tuned and let me know your theories after watching this video. And of course, as always, right before we do hop into it, I would greatly appreciate if you could subscribe to the channel to help reach my goal of 45,000 subscribers. Let's see if we get today's sub goal of 10 subs. Let's hop right into it. Now, how many Pokemon are going to be in the Winds Waves Pokedex, you may ask? Well, the rumor on the street is about 307 brand new Pokemon. And the thing to remember with this insane 300 plus number is, well, first of all, it has been told to us by many reputable leakers that are coming out to say that the 300 plus number is not actually crazy to say, and that it is pretty legitimate, although we'll talk about some of that stuff at the end of this video. But this specifically includes new Pokemon species. It also does include new regional forms. So for example, if Psyduck got a brand new form, that would still be included as a brand new Pokemon, but it does not include the new weather forms. The weather forms being the new battle evolution gimmick. You know, think of just how Mega Evolution is. It's technically a new form, but it won't count as a new form in the Pokedex, and this does not include Pokemon with multiple forms like Alcremie. Those are just counted as one single Pokemon. So my theory is, what if they will split these 307 different unique Pokemon into both different games? So basically half being in Winds and half being in Waves. That would lead us with 153 Pokemon per game, plus the seed Pokemon would be that odd one out because we do have leaks of that Pokemon that would definitely be in both games. We also do know from other leaks and rumors out there that the legendary Pokemon will be in both games and both will play a role throughout the storyline apparently. But then I got to thinking, what about the starters? We have 3 different starter Pokemon, of course, with an evolution line, so that's 9 total Pokemon, so they do have to fit in there somewhere. So even if you do put all 9 of those Pokemon throughout both of the games, it wouldn't really affect it that much because you could still have some shared Pokemon, or maybe they'll have like a different evolution split. I definitely don't think they're going to do that, but hey, just a theory. The numbers would become a little bit messy because 9 is an odd number, so if they are thinking about splitting these Pokemon into both games, it doesn't have to be a perfectly even number. They could have one game with 154 Pokemon and the other game with 153. I think we all know Gamefreak and they don't really care all that much about that type of stuff. Or maybe, you know, the odd one out could have an extra Pokemon being some sort of legendary or post-game encounter or something, which I don't think they would do. Once again, I'm just kind of theorizing here. This would definitely encourage people to buy both versions of the game. We also had a recent leak basically talking all about how Game Freak, the Pokemon company, and Nintendo really want us to buy both versions of the games, which makes sense. They want to make the most money possible. They want the most amount of these games to be sold as possible, and something like this would be a very big reason to be buying the other version. That is also where I kind of think this theory gets a little bit shaky, because that is a ton of different Pokemon involved in this situation to where it wouldn't really make sense to play both versions of the games when they're going to have the exact same storyline. Although basically we'll have the same storyline, although apparently you can kind of play the game a little bit differently during every playthrough. So maybe the replayability of these games is going to be a big factor within the overall storyline, because allegedly you can kind of take different, I guess, storylines to get to the end of the game, like make different decisions and stuff. So if we're going down that idea of the different gameplay stories, you could technically have 2 distinct storylines, different gyms, different experiences, seeing different things to actually justify playing and purchasing both of the different games. And maybe the weather conditions could be different from game to game, or maybe there will be some major difference between both of the Pokemon games, because more often than not, the difference of the games, it's very tiny. Sure, there may be a couple Pokemon exclusive to one or the other version. That's pretty normal. That wouldn't be too crazy to say, or like, you know, Pokemon that can only evolve if you trade it. I am personally someone that does not buy both copies though, because it's expensive and you don't really need to play both copies to get your full experience and gameplay out of a game. If I ever do play the other copy, it's usually a couple years years down the line when I just purchased the other copy, pre-owned or something, if I just want to replay that generation, you know? Would you buy both versions of the game if it means the Pokedex is basically going to be completely brand new? Because also, think about it. If you were going to be playing Winds with 153 Pokemon and then Waves with another 153 or 154, whatever they would do, every Pokemon you would see would pretty much be different, but there will still be returning Pokemon. So it's not going to be like Generation 5 where there were only just brand new Pokemon around the region. This will include new Pokemon with existing Pokemon, but I kind of do think that would be a very interesting thing for them to do. Another theory that I was thinking of is, well, maybe they're going to put a bunch of other Pokemon in the DLC. Like, maybe the base game will have about 170 to 200 Pokemon. Then, you know, a year later, 6 months on the line, whatever, they will drop the DLC for the game, revealing and releasing all of the other Pokemon to add up to 300 or 307. This would make more sense in my opinion, because that way people that have both games or one or the other can still have access to all brand new Pokemon and then be able to purchase the DLC, because there definitely will be a DLC, like without a doubt, and have access to the other Pokemon exclusive to that DLC. All I know is that when I'm looking at a new generation, I always try to plan my team ahead of time if we know the Pokedex at least, or at least some of the Pokemon. I don't want to have to pick between an awesome Pokemon from one version that I don't have because I won't have the other version. But it is very interesting that the leak is about 300 brand new Pokemon. I think that is definitely possible. Obviously, I'm a little bit skeptical because things could always change. This could be the original number, and the final number when the game does completely drop could be way lower. It could be more so 200, which I kind of do think would make a little bit more sense to be around the 200 range. But hey, if there's ever a generation to give us this ginormous size of a Pokedex, is Generation 10, the first double-digit Pokemon game ever, and I think that they have to really go crazy for this game. But on the side of, you know, the people, I kind of do think people would get very frustrated and upset if they were to split the Pokedex into two separate games. And think about it, you know, the price to buy both games, it's pretty crazy. So not a lot of people can do that or would want to even do that. So Pokemon would definitely face many challenges doing that. So I feel like the odds of them actually splitting the Pokedex is very, very low. But I'm also trying to think of it, you know, from Game Freak's point of view. They have not dropped a brand new generation in 5 years, at least 5 years by the time this game does officially release. Of course, we have had Pokemon games like Legend ZA, but there were no brand new Pokemon. Sure, we had brand new Mega Evolutions, but you know, that's a little bit different. And like I said earlier, I personally think the Pokedex will be shortened. I think they will scrap some because 300 is a lot. I still think it's going to be the biggest Pokedex by far. I'm estimating now maybe like 2 to 250 just because we have had a very reputable source being Ball Guy come out to say that, yeah, like 300, that's not that insane to think of for this game. Dude, and I want to reiterate once again, sorry to be repetitive, I just really want to make it clear that things can always change behind the scenes. Nothing has been officially announced yet, but also think about how big Pokemon is at the moment. It's such a huge franchise that also has had some criticism of the games recently, so imagine they do drop a banger Pokedex, like one of the best Pokedex of all time that is about 300 or like 2 to 300. Just imagine the boatloads of money that Game Freak, the Pokemon Company, and Nintendo would easily generate by creating Pokemon cards, merchandise, you know, t-shirts, plush for about 300 new Pokemon. Bro, they would have another whole ocean size full of money to be swimming in just from this game alone. That would hopefully give them the resources to be kind of pushing the boundaries again a little bit in the future, if that makes sense. But hey, I don't know. This is Game Freak and Nintendo we're talking about. But it does kind of just make sense if they were to give us a huge Pokedex, because they would be losing quite literally nothing. They have literally only things to gain with this topic. So I would love to know your thoughts, how you think this Pokedex is going to make sense. Anyway, thank you so much for watching today's video. If you are even watching this far, comment down below flame. Make sure to hype up the video if you don't mind. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.